there's a little bit of a misconception that this is a ruby red state, and especially this district's ruby red. But the fact is, we had a Democratic representative for 18 years up until 2004 when Curtis Johnson won. So the potential is there, and there's enough registered Democrats there. They just have to turn out. And Tennessee ranks dead last in the country in voter turnout. And what we saw was in 2016, perhaps the quality of the candidates, perhaps because Democrats were simply complacent because we'd had our president for 8 years, they stayed home. And not only did Donald Trump win Tennessee, but a lot of Republicans won in Tennessee because they either didn't have a opponent or simply because the turnout was so low on the Democratic side. So again, hopefully the quote unquote blue wave that we hope to see nationally, hopefully that'll happen here in Tennessee. We have two amazing candidates at the top of the ballot. As you know, our former governor, Phil Bredesen, is running for United States Senate. Our former mayor of Nashville, Carl Dean, is running for governor. And hopefully those two gentlemen will bring in a lot of Democratic voters and help people like myself.
So what kind of a reception have you been getting as you're going around campaigning? Are people really excited that there's finally a Democrat running? Are people surprised that there's a Democrat running? What sort of reaction, what kind of reception are you getting?
The door-to-door canvassing has far and away been my favorite part of campaigning. Usually the response I get is, oh, thank God, we've got a Democrat on the ballot. The people are aware that Curtis has not had opponents. It's either thank God we have a Democrat, or you're the first politician that's been to my door. Door-to-door canvassing is kind of an old school technique, and people just haven't done it here. And so usually I hear one of two things: thank God there's a Democrat here, and thank God somebody came here to begin with. So at first I thought that the phone banking would be the easier part of it and the door-to-door would be arduous, but it's actually been the reverse. People really didn't care for me calling them, but they loved having me come to their porch. And when you get people on their porch, they're very honest with you. Mm-hmm. They get off of that kind of a mob mentality that you have on social media where it's not personal. You don't see their faces. You're not talking to them face to face. But when you get people on their porch, they're very candid. And the reception has been fantastic.
You mentioned that you were surprised that this district hadn't had a Democrat running. What does the district look like? Where exactly in Tennessee is this? And what are the kinds of things that people are concerned with there? Well,
this district is about 40 miles northwest of Nashville. And, we're kind of on the south side of Clarksville. Clarksville is this growing city. 140 people a day move to Tennessee. About 85 of them are in the Nashville basin. But we've got a pretty good chunk of them up here, too, because a lot of people commute to Nashville from here. So we're kind of on the south side and east side of the city proper of Clarksville. So there's just this incredible combination of the south side of the city, but also all of this rural area as well. And so I get to go door to door, some places where I have to drive a half mile in between doors. And then I have a city section where it's just door. So it's just an incredible cross section of diversity. You couldn't ask for better. It makes it very exciting to see all these different people here. And, they have some major concerns. Clarksville has not had a strong advocate in our legislature. In fact, we really haven't had an advocate at all because the incumbent doesn't live here primarily. He lives in Stewart County and he owns a house here. So he really has been truly an absentee landlord. Not only have we not had a voice in Nashville at our capital, but he doesn't even live here to begin with. So when you combine those two things, what's happened is, we have a state park, this beautiful state park called Dunbar Cave, and there's a beautiful lake. Well, the dam broke, the lake drained, and we needed our representative to stand up and ask the state for money to restore this park back to its original state, and he didn't do it. So of the $2.5 million we needed to restore the park, and I say we because I'm one of the members of the Friends of the Park, we got a tenth of that. We got $200,000. So we had to settle for a pretty poor substitute of what the park should have gotten. Also, in our district, we have a state highway here, Riverside Drive, that was falling literally into the river. It was eroding into the Cumberland River. Again, our representative did not bother to ask the state for money. So our mayor had to ask the federal government to send the Army Corps of Engineers in to reinforce it with boulders. It looks terrible. And businesses have not built up along Riverside the way they should. And again, we're looking for our representative to say, hey, we're the fifth biggest city in the state. We're soon to be, in 10 years, we'll be the fourth biggest city in the state. Why can't we get the same kind of attention that Knoxville gets, that Nashville and Chattanooga get? Why can't we get that here in Clarksville? And that's all we're asking. That's all voters are asking is, hey, we've got an awesome university here, Austin Peay, where I graduated from. Why does all the money go to UT in Knoxville? Why can't we get some of it over here in Clarksville? So voters are concerned that Curtis Johnson has not done enough for them, has not given them a voice, and they want it to change.
So you are a factory production manager, and you've worked in manufacturing for a number of years. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the manufacturing industry and sort of some of your ideas for helping manufacturing jobs stay around, because that's been a big issue nationally, where I'm from in Youngstown, Ohio, and I'm sure in Tennessee it's an issue as well.
Well, I can tell you that the reduction of organized labor has not helped. You know, back in the 70s at its peak, the membership peak, before the Reagan administration basically went to war against the unions and cut 5 million union jobs. In the 70s, 1 out of 3 workers in the public sector worked as part of a collective bargaining unit, and now that number has gone to 1 out of 11. So you're talking, 9% of workers now belong to a union versus 33%, and it has not helped. I think this has directly contributed to the erosion of the middle class in the United States, and especially here in Tennessee. What's happening, Clarksville's become kind of this colonial city for foreign corporations to come in and say, hey, we have a young workforce here. Our average age is 28 in Clarksville. There's almost no union presence at all. They've got an expressway running right through town. We've got all this farmland that we can pave and turn into a new factory. And so we're seeing a lot of foreign corporations come here and break ground. And we give them all these advantages to make tons of money. We have no state income tax. That alone saves them tons of money. And the problem is they're not trickling it down as trickle down normally fails. It certainly fails here. They're not sharing that wealth with their workers. So what's happening is they're hiring a very small core of workers for $14, $15 an hour. But then everything else goes through contract and temp agencies. $9.50, $10.50 an hour, no benefits, no vacation or holidays, no clear path to permanency. And they're just spinning through their workers. The retention rate here is awful. Our turnover rate in our factories here is about 30%. So you're hiring 5 workers to keep 3. And what's happening is these kids are going into these factories. They're getting 4, 6, 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day. Our workers in Tennessee are working more hours now than any workers have ever worked in factories since before the 1930s, before the unions really took hold. And so it's not a lack of factories coming to Tennessee. Oh, no, we're getting tons of them. And that's why Republicans tout this 3% unemployment, right? Well, let me tell you, nobody believes in their right mind that 97 out of every 100 people are working, especially not here. We have a lot of early retirees from the Army. We have a lot of military spouses and students. There's no way 97 out of 100 people work, but that 3% represents how many are getting paid benefits from the state of Tennessee. And Tennessee is actually one of the hardest states to get unemployment compensation. But back to the factories, we have tons of factories moving in here because our legislature has rolled out the red carpet for corporations and CEOs. They give them every advantage they could ever want, from the ones I've mentioned to cheap energy to, the central U.S. location. We've got all these major markets within 5 hours of us, like Atlanta and Cincinnati and Louisville and St. Louis, plus our own big cities. We give them all these advantages, but they don't want to share the money with their workers. So as a result, the turnover is ridiculous. And sure, the unemployment rate is low, but the quality of the jobs and the level of the wages is also low. So I'll be honest with you. I don't want another factory in this town unless it pays a living wage, which to me is 17, 18 bucks an hour with good benefits from the date of hire. When I hired into General Motors, you mentioned that I've been in manufacturing my whole life. When I hired into General Motors in 1994, I was making $13.50 an hour. That is $4 an hour more than most of these kids are making now 24 years later. And that's ridiculous because you and I both know that the cost of living is going up. So that's all I'm saying is I know that manufacturing jobs are plentiful, but they've got to be good jobs. I only want the best for our Tennessee workers. They deserve it.
So on a lot of your posts on social media and your pictures, you have a hashtag reunite. Can you talk about what that means to you?
My graphic designer, Corey Sokol, who had the challenging task of making this legitimate right out of the gate, right? A first-time politician looking legitimate right out of the gate. So she had to do all the photos, the logos, and give us credibility over a year ago. And, of course, she did a fantastic job. And I would ask anyone getting into politics to consider using her. And she said, well, let's come up with a logo. And I had all these very ambitious ideas, like an America of States United. And she said, okay, well, you're not running for a U.S. seat here, okay? You're running for State House of Representatives. I said, okay, well, how about Tennessee United? And she says, well, that's too long. She says, I just want something short. And I just said, well, then how about reunite? Because that really covers so many bases, not only from a labor perspective, but also just because of the political divisions we have. And she said, well, let's make it hashtag reunite. And every time you post something, write hashtag reunite. And eventually, if you post enough stuff on social media, it will draw people to that. It'll actually become a thing, which in June of 2017 didn't think it would become a thing. People were still trying to figure out how to pronounce my name, and they weren't looking me up. And so we did it. We stuck with it. And she said, everything you write, everything we post is going to have hashtag reunite on it. And so that was Corey's idea. And I like it. I think it's very encompassing. And I think now more than ever, it's a good slogan to have. And if anything happened from here and we were ever to run for a higher office, whether it was a U.S. office or whatnot, the slogan would not change. We have divisions in this country that haven't been seen since the Civil War. And we're at a turning point, and we need to reunite. It's not just reunite our country, but our community. We have families that have broken up over this administration, and we need to reunite. So that's why we stuck with it.
You mentioned families. You have a couple of daughters yourself. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what raising teenagers sort of has brought to your running for office? How has that sort of shaped you as a candidate and the kinds of positions that you hold?
Well, yes, I've been married 20 years. I actually been with my wife 22 years, and our daughters are 14 and 17. And I'll tell you, when you have teenage daughters, you think a little differently than I might have 18 years ago before I had kids. It shapes a lot of your platforms on wage inequality. It shapes your platforms on a woman's right to choose. It makes you think of, the first thing when people take what they think is a moral high ground and just set a line in the sand, say absolutely not to a woman's right to choose what they're doing with their bodies. My first question is always, do you have daughters or sons? That's the first question I ask, because when you have young daughters, it does